All right, this is Boxing with the Truth, and I'm the Truth. It's April 23rd, and today we have with us Teresa Tapia, Johnny Tapia's widow and former manager. How you doing today, Teresa?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to do the interview. I know we kind of had to go through a lot of things to get this interview done, and I'm very excited to talk to you about your life and Johnny Tapia's life together and some of his career.
Well, I look forward to sharing that with you.
Okay, so first I just want to give the fans a few facts. I know a lot of them do know, but a lot of them don't. So I'm just going to go over a few little facts of Johnny Tapia. He was a super featherweight fighter, pro boxer. His record was 59 with 30 knockouts, 5 losses, 2 draws. There's a lot of negativity about him, and I don't want to focus on all the negativity because Johnny Tapia wasn't all a negative person at all. He lived with a lot of drama, yes. He had a lot of demons, and we're going to go over a few of that, but I want to talk about the positive Johnny Tapia as well. So, yes, he had a cocaine addiction. Everybody's aware of that. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He ran with the gang for a while when he was younger. His mother was killed when he was about 8 years old. He was led to believe for years all the way through adult life until 2 years before his passing that his father had been killed or that he had died. And then actually we found out later that his father had been in prison for a while, federal prison, and then he found out that his father actually was Jerry Padilla, correct?
Actually, that's not correct, but we'll get into that when it gets us.
Oh, okay. All right, so we'll talk about that more later then. Because that was, obviously that information was put out there to the public though, right?
It was, yes.
Okay. So, also, Johnny Tapia's career, like I said, it did take a lot of ups and downs in his career. He won some small titles. And then due to the cocaine use, he was suspended from boxing for about 3.5 years. Took him a few more months to get back in the ring. So by the time he got in the ring, it was about 4 years. Now, during that time, that's when you came into the picture, right? You guys met at a barbecue? Is that how it worked?
Yes, I met him when he was also boxing, and I didn't know who he was and didn't know anything about him.
Okay, so you just meet this guy at a barbecue. You don't know he's a boxer. You don't know that his name's like a household name. That you don't know his past. You don't know anything about this guy. And so just tell me from there, how did all this transpire?
I actually had grown up in California, so when I came back to New Mexico, I was with a friend of mine, and we went to, she took me to this barbecue to go meet her boyfriend, and we were going to pick him up and leave somewhere else. So when I walked into this house, I remember Johnny, he was sitting on the kitchen counter, and I was standing by the door, and he just kind of came up and introduced himself, and he was just very persistent. And it was funny because I was not interested. And the more that I showed this interest to him, the more he was determined. So it was kind of like that from the beginning.
Okay, so now a lot of people would think right there that they would think, boy, this guy is kind of like stalkerish. I need to get away from this guy. But no, you saw something in this guy, right? Even though he was persistent, there was something about him that caught your eye just like the fans do. No matter, what he did or how he acted, there was always an attraction to this guy no matter what. You just could not dislike Johnny Tapia.
Well, not right away. I thought he was strange in the beginning. I kind of, he just kind of just hung around, and I didn't really, I couldn't see any kind of common ground with him. And anyhow, the barbecue, I left from there, and he had given me his phone number, and I didn't take it, and I left. And it was funny because it seemed like I had never met this guy, and that was the first time. And then after that, he just kept popping up everywhere. He showed up to a cousin's house of mine. He showed up with my older brother. He showed up, like just coincidence or stalker, I don't know. I just know he kept showing up everywhere, but I think it was probably like the fourth time I ran into him. I was at a fast food restaurant with a friend of mine, and he walks in with his cousin, and he sits down right by me, and I thought, oh my gosh, here's this guy again. And at that point, though, he caught my attention because he was very funny. And that's what actually enabled me to let my guard down, and he was just funny. But I'll never forget it. It was, the first time him and I sat across from each other and actually had a conversation. And remember, he looked at me and he said, I'm going to marry you. You're going to be my wife. He's like, you're the one that I want. You're the girl for me. And I kind of laughed and, said, I have never even dated you. You want me to be your wife? And he's like, I'm telling you. And sure enough, a few weeks later, we were married.
Oh, just in a few weeks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it wasn't very long. It was a very fast courtship, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it was just like Johnny. I mean, you see how intense he was in the ring and how he just went through life. That's the way he was even dating. It was like just your hands were full right away because he just knew what he wanted and was very persistent about it.
But you guys ended up being married 20 years, right?
We did. Yes, we did.
And I want to talk about that because, I mean, honestly, you have to be one of the most mentally strong women I have ever heard of after I learned the entire story of Johnny Tapia. I don't know.
Mentally strong or mentally unstable?
Well, because, I mean, I heard the part about, in the beginning you didn't really know about his drug use, and then people told you about it, and then, he overdosed, and you could have left him right there. That you could have been like, that's it, I'm not dealing with this, I don't have to deal with this. And that could have been the end of it. A lot of women would have just walked. But you didn't, and then, I mean, through the drugs, through prison, was he still involved in the gang stuff when you were married to him?
No, actually, it's funny because I know that Johnny, was associated or affiliated with certain, gang communities or whatever, but he was also, what was funny about him was that he was able to go to any neighborhood and got along with everybody. So it was kind of a weird paradox for that, because you're not supposed to get along with certain, people, and he did. He got along with everybody. Okay.
But no, I remember, I even heard in the documentary, and I heard this before, and I find this really funny, how you actually, to help him get straight for a while, you actually locked him in the house, correct? And told him, he said he was going to break everything, and you told him, fine, go ahead and break it, because we'll all buy it new when you start fighting again, right?
Yeah, I took it. Yes, I did. I took things to extremes. What had happened was we were married, and the first night of our marriage, as it says in the documentary, I found out that he was a drug addict. I actually caught him doing drugs, and this was our wedding night, and it turned into this huge fight, and I remember he was into some kind of altercation outside, and the police came, and my mom, at the time, she didn't want him to be arrested, so she told the police, come on, it's his wedding night. And we had this nice suite that the Maloof had sponsored, and instead he took me to some dumpy little hotel because he didn't want to leave the area. He wanted to continue whatever he was doing. So I just remember going to this little awful place, and we got down, and I mean, we barely walked in the room, and he said, I have to make a phone call, and he walked out. And then I didn't see him again until the next day. I called my mom and told her we switched locations, and I'm over here. I just remember she came banging at my door at 7 a.m. and she was frantic. When I opened the door, she started crying. She was in tears. She was like, I'm so happy you're okay. And I was like, what's going on? And she said, Johnny's dead. And I said, what? And she said, he's dead. They called me. You need to go down to the hospital. You have to identify his body. And I hadn't even been married 24 hours, and I was being told I was a widow. So that's how my marriage with Johnny started off. And so I remember, fast forward, that was the beginning. So it was a lot of that kind of drama in between. It didn't slow down. I mean, there was all this drama. So fast forward to 9 months after our marriage, he'd been in and out of jail, and he was always facing prison time and just a bunch of things. And I was at the point where I was giving up on him, and I remember his ex-manager and trainer, Paul Chavez, came to see me at the little house I shared with Johnny, and he said, look, Johnny's been clean in jail, he wants to come back to boxing, let's give him another chance. He won't do it unless you're with him. And at that point I was already severing ties with him, and Paul said, this is what I really think is good for him, and so I agreed to consider it, and Johnny got out of jail, and he did look healthy, he looked normal, and I remember it was like yesterday, it was like December 23rd, I remember he came, to the little place, and we talked about it, and he said it was going to be serious. I told him I'm not putting up with anything. If you mess up, you're not going to like consequences, because I'm done being naive, I'm done, like all this stuff. So he comes in, and kid you not, December 24th comes, it's Christmas Eve, he says, I'm going to go visit my grandparents. I said, okay. He doesn't come back until like January 1st. When he comes back, he's messed up. And I just remember, it's like you get to a point in your life where you're just upset and you've had enough. And it was that kind of a day. I remember he walked in, and I just remember like the look on his face, like, I'm sorry, I'm going to change. I said, oh no, you're going to change all right. And so he passed out, and I remember cutting out a piece of the carpet, and I stashed the key under it. We have wrought iron on every window and door, and you couldn't get out without the key. And I literally locked it in there and wouldn't open the door for anybody until he kicked his drugs. And then that was how he came back to boxing.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, because you are definitely a huge rock and a huge positive force behind Johnny Tapia coming back to the ring. And not only did he come back to the ring, he ended up winning 5 world titles, which I want to go over real quick. The WBO Bantamweight, the WBA Bantamweight title, the IBF and the WBO Super Featherweight, and the IBF Featherweight title. So, I mean, without you, I don't know if he would have ever won those.
I don't know. I mean, he had such a great talent, and he always credited me to to that. And I say it was it was both of us. We had a great support system, and I think what it was is that I was just very stubborn and determined, and I knew that he had so much to give, and he was a great person. But that other side of him, he needed to be curbed, and with the way his wild ways. And so I think I was good at offsetting that for him, because he needed to settle down, and I kind of brought that to him. But at the same time, I needed to loosen up, and he brought that to my life.
Okay.
Because I've always, you know what I mean? We balanced each other out.
And I want to talk about that a little bit, because a lot of people always hear about, the negative stuff he did, and then, some of the fans see about what he does in the ring. But what kind of overall husband and father was Johnny Tapia?
Johnny was definitely one of, just knowing him, I was blessed to have him in my life, and he was an awesome father. He's very, very protective of the people he loves. I mean, he put my children and me on a pedestal, and he guarded us literally with his life, and would have literally, killed anybody that tried to hurt any of us, and that's just who he was. Like I said, he did have his demons, but it was more self-destructive. He never really tried to hurt anybody else. It was always stuff that he did to himself, and indirectly, because of him hurting himself, we would get hurt. And he had such a high media attention on him that everything, we lived it in the public eye under a microscope. So it was hard, because you're trying to deal with the problem at hand, and then you're dealing with all the public scrutiny. So it was, a challenge.
Okay, I want to talk about a fight, because I know, he's mentioned it in interviews that this is probably one of the most proudest moments he's had on his comeback when he beat Henry Martinez. What led up to that? How did he feel about that fight? Because you were in the house with him. I know he had to be excited about it. It was his comeback, and then he beats Henry Martinez. What kind of feeling? What did you guys do after that fight? How did he celebrate, or how did he feel? Did he feel like he was back, the Johnny Tapia that once was?
Yes, he actually. It was definitely a proudest moment. His career at that point. It was like this long road, and he was he was happy, and he was content with his life at that point. And it was funny because he said, my whole life I just wanted to be a world champion, and I accomplished that. And my way of thinking was, why just a one-time world champion? Why not be a multi-champion and shoot for the Hall of Fame? Because, so see what I mean? We balance each other out. Like, I think Johnny would have been content at stopping at one title, and I was more like, you're so talented, keep going. But it was, so I think he was happy for him, and it was, he was just one of the proudest moments that he had, and everybody was happy from, his home state, everybody. And so it was just where it was like that defining moment, showing people that he's a force to be reckoned with, and he was definitely back.
Okay, speaking of world champion, I don't know exactly how this transpired, so I want you to kind of tell me. After his death, he was awarded an honorary WBC title, correct? How did that all happen?
Mauricio Zuleman, who is the president of that organization now, unfortunately, we all know his father has passed on, and his father was a great man, and Mauricio, he's doing a great job, filling his father's shoes and fulfilling his father's legacy. But what happened was, Mauricio I'd run into him, and he said, look, Johnny always wanted a WBC belt. Everybody knew that. Like, that was the only belt he was never able to fight for. We had a deal signed, it fell through, and that was the one thing he wanted and never had. And Mauricio, if you go back to the history of the WBC, they've been an organization for 53 years, and Johnny's the third honorary member that they've ever given this, this title to. One was somebody, an Asian person who had served a lot of years in prison. He was wrongfully convicted, and he was a fighter, and they gave him that belt. Another one was Ruben the Hurricane, and the third one was Johnny. So it's very impressive that, they recognized Johnny and were able to give that to him, and it meant a lot to me, and I know it would have meant a lot to Johnny.
Well, that's a great story, because I was wondering myself how that all happened, and I'm glad you cleared that up. I want to backtrack a little bit. When I brought up his biological father, I want to discuss that real quick so you can set everybody straight on that. So what exactly transpired, and go ahead and correct me that I was wrong, so that the public know and the fans know exactly what the deal is with his father.
Back in 2010, when Johnny was released from prison, he started hanging out with a person by the name of Teresa Tapia Sr., and this person had come to us a few months after hanging out with Johnny and said, hey, I think I'm Johnny's father. We started talking about it, questioning things, and bottom line is, Johnny said, I don't believe anything, I want a DNA. They actually did a home DNA, and there was issues from the very beginning with that home DNA, but it showed, that they were a father and son, whatever, and so later on, when Johnny felt unsure of it, he'd wanted to take the test again, and Jerry Padilla Sr. did not want to. And so it was always that question, and last year in March, Jerry Padilla's other son, Jeffrey Padilla, he ended up taking a DNA against Johnny's DNA that's still on file here with the medical investigator's office, and it showed that they're not a match. They do not share the same father.
Okay, so then basically we're back to square one, that Johnny's real father possibly could have been killed or murdered before he was born?
Yes, I think that's, I think that Johnny was searching for some answers, throughout his life, but at the same time, Johnny was very content in the father that he did have, which is Miguel Tapia, which is his grandfather. He's the one that raised Johnny, taught him how to fight. I don't think that there was any, maybe there was more curiosity on Johnny's part, but I believe that, at least he had that father figure in Miguel.
Also, just to bring up his mother again, I understand that the reason that they actually did examine and open up her case had a lot to do with you. You kind of pushed that issue. Is that true?
Yes, Johnny and I, we would talk, and he was just always so upset, about everything that had transpired, and he just, I used to tell him, and he'd say, I just want to know, and I got with his attorney, and I got with a local reporter here, and, I told them, and they hired some investigators, and we actually were able to get it reopened through the DA's office.
Okay. And just for the record, so the fans know, actually they did figure out who killed Johnny Tapia's mother, but unfortunately the man had already died 8 years after the fact, correct? And he had been hit by a car?
Yes, I don't remember the exact time frame afterwards, but like 8 to 10 years after Johnny's mom was murdered, that this man was run over. And, but yes, they did solve it, and they believe they had the right individual, and, because of all the evidence and the case against them and stuff like that. But nobody pursued it, so he just went unpunished, but he did pass away.
Well, I don't know if Johnny believed in karma, but I do, and that sounds like karma kind of caught up with him, and he kind of paid, for what he did in one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't hide from the man upstairs, and we can hide a lot of things from most people, but Johnny and I were firm believers that, the eyes upstairs, there's no lying, there's no hiding. So that's kind of what happens.
I wanna talk about another fight briefly. I've seen interviews that it meant an awful lot to him, and I want to hear from you what Johnny said personally after this fight. When he fought Danny Romero, how much did that mean to him that he won that fight?
What's funny is that it was a huge rivalry, and Johnny, he didn't want it to be. I mean, Johnny thought there was enough room in the world for both of them, and Johnny was more of a good guy, wanting to embrace Danny, and, we can do this together, let's put Albuquerque on the map. But it was funny because the Romero camp couldn't handle that, and they wanted Johnny out of there, and it just got to the point where things just got so bitter between them that Johnny wanted to set the record straight and show who the best was once and for all. So it was an important fight to Johnny. He definitely wanted, that glory of holding the, Albuquerque's best, and he had no doubt in his mind, but he had to prove it to everybody, and he did. So I think it was another defining moment in Johnny's life, because it put him on top again into a whole other, it was like another chapter in his life.
After that fight, was there any words exchanged as far as between the two of them about any respect or hey, it's done between us or anything like that, or did they just go their separate ways?
On Johnny's behalf, he tried to offer respect, but Danny was still a little bit bitter. A couple of years later, though, they both did a complete turnaround where Danny actually was leaning on Johnny for a while, and Johnny was putting him on his undercards for Showtime and was responsible for getting him an intercontinental shot and was trying to get him back on the road to becoming the champion. So, Johnny, he didn't hold a grudge to him. Danny was just a younger brother type, figure to him, and he was always willing to help.
Okay. I also want to bring up the fact that, I mean, like I said, we know about all the negative stuff in Johnny's life, and I'm wondering if that had a lot to do with... Johnny went through a lot of trainers in his career. Why?
He just felt that Johnny always believed that you take what you can from each trainer and then you put them all together. That was just the way he was. He was always curious. He never wanted to stop learning. It didn't matter how seasoned he was. He wanted to learn more. And so he did jump around a lot. And if he could learn something from different people, that's what he wanted to do. And he did. It was kind of weird. Like, he never wanted to stop learning.
Okay. All right, I want to touch, just so the fans know, actually, there is a book out there, correct? It was written a few years back. It's called, how do you say it? Mi Vida Loca, and which means My Crazy Life, right?
Mi Vida Loca, which, yes, it translates to My Crazy Life. And actually, that title is interesting in itself. Oscar de la Hoya gave Johnny that title.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, Johnny used to be babyface assassin, but when he went into camp with Oscar, again, another long story, but to sum it up, Johnny was kicked out of New Mexico by a judge for 2 years, and it was either leave New Mexico or go to prison. So Johnny, we left New Mexico and we went up to Big Bear, and so we were with Oscar, and Oscar opened the doors to Johnny, and was just so gracious about giving him his trainer and all these things. But anyhow, Oscar he was a very disciplined fighter and a very disciplined, person that trained and had certain regimens and did certain things and ate right and did all the right things. And Johnny was just crazy in everything he did. And so Oscar was constantly, because he never called him by his first name, he'd say, Tapia. He'd say, Tapia. You're just the most crazy guy. You're mi vida loca. So next thing you know, every time Johnny would walk in the gym, Oscar would say, mi vida loca. And Oscar actually is the one responsible for getting Johnny his first endorsement with some equipment. And Oscar surprised Johnny and ordered some trunks, and sponsored him, and they had put mi vida loca on it, and it stuck.
Wow. That's an interesting story. I've never heard that before, so... That's really cool that you just told everybody how that all came about and gave Oscar credit for that. So I mean, and in his own right, Oscar was a great fighter as well. So
yes, very disciplined. But anyhow, that's what the book means, and that's where the name came from, and it stuck. And so yes, there is a book out there.
Okay, and there's also an HBO documentary that just came out recently called Tapia, and I've watched it. I loved it. I wish it was longer. I wish it was a 2-hour movie. Which we're going to talk about that because I understand that, is there 2 movies coming out?
Yes, it's kind of funny actually. It's the person that did the movie that was responsible for the documentary Tapia is a director by the name of Eddie Alcazar, and it wasn't actually supposed to be a documentary. What that was is research for a film that Eddie was going to do, and Johnny unfortunately passed during this time. So Eddie wanted to pay homage to Johnny, so he ended up doing a documentary, and it just kind of got bigger and bigger, and then bigger names got involved, like 50 Cent and Lou DiBella, and so it just took that whole documentary to a new level. And so now the movie that Eddie's directing is called Johnny, and it's a time period of 1992 to 1995. He picked those years of Johnny's life because those were the worst of Johnny's, being out on the streets, kicked out of boxing, addicted to drugs, and it shows his struggles and his comeback. And so Eddie felt like there's so much stuff on Johnny. He said, most movies you have to create, traumatic events or exciting events. In Johnny's case, you have to chop so much out. But that's what he chose to do, is that time period.
Okay, now, what's the other movie about?
Mm-hmm. The other movie is actually, with some, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, to be honest with you, on that one, because they're getting ready for press releases and stuff.
Okay.
I can tell you who's involved in it. There's a collaboration of 5 people. It is John Tapia, it is Sean McEwen, Lou DiBella, 50 Cent, and myself. Okay.
Now, I got a question. Was there another movie made back in like 2010 or 2011, maybe a short film or something, that starred Shiloh Fernandez as Johnny Tapia?
No, that's the one that was Eddie. Eddie had originally cast Shiloh as the lead actor for Johnny. And that's the one that you're talking about. That's that movie.
Okay.
That's the same movie, Eddie.
But is Shiloh Fernandez still going to be the character, or no?
I believe not. I think my understanding is it's going to be Dominic Cooper. He actually played on Captain America and several other movies. He's a great actor, and so not that Shiloh wasn't. I think that's what they ended up going with, I believe.
Well, honestly, do you get to have any say in who stars as the character of Johnny Tapia? He was your husband. You know who would portray him the best, or who looks like him the best. Do you get to have a say in that?
they'll go over it with me respectfully and say, this is what we think. Here's a little, here's a short, reading from him. What do you think? And then, of course, if they don't look like him, you can't really get too worried about that because it's acting and they can do all these things. The funny story is there was the guy that played in Battleship. Gosh, I forget his name. He played in a lot of big action movies, and he's just an awesome actor as well. Now, he wouldn't have worked, but he actually went and out of his way and contacted Eddie and wanted to play Johnny. But Eddie said there was just no way that he could make that one fit because he's 6'1", he's Canadian, I forget his name. He's a huge actor, and I mean, you see, it just was such an honor that these people, loved Johnny's story and wanted to become attached to it. That's what was awesome about it.
Okay, well, I just want to wrap this up then with one more thing. I want you to talk about the Johnny Tapia Foundation, so everybody's aware of what that is.
The Johnny Tapia Foundation is something that we created, unfortunately, after Johnny passed. When Johnny was alive, he wanted it to be the Virginia Tapia Foundation after his mom. And what Johnny wanted, and we're just trying to keep his vision going, was a foundation that helped anybody and everybody, and it wasn't limited to one thing. If it was, military people who needed help with finances, if it was a school that needed computers, if it was an abused woman, if it was an abused child, if it was a family that was homeless, he didn't want there to be any limits to what they were able to provide.
Okay.
So that's what we just keep doing, that now it's the Johnny Tapia Foundation.
All right. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking time to do this interview. I know it was kind of a long one, but like I said, there's no way we could, crunch the life of Johnny Tapia into a short interview. It's just not going to happen. I could talk to you all day and just learn so much about Johnny Tapia. So I really appreciate you taking time for the interview. And is there anything else that you want the fans to know about Johnny Tapia?
Just that Johnny really honestly lived for fans and for people in general, and that's the person he was. It wasn't phony. It was real. I mean, behind the scenes, publicly, that's who he was. And I think that he had one of the biggest hearts ever, and I hope that carried on and, that people are able to see that and know that about him.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I know in the documentary, he said he wasn't sure what his purpose was. I personally, after doing all this research on his life, I think his purpose was to inspire people. And I think that's why Johnny Tapia was here, just to inspire people and to push them to do their best. Because if you look at his life, and he became a 5-time world champion, anybody can overcome what they're going through and reach their goals.
Well, I know that if Johnny was here, he'd be honored to hear you say that, because he was a very humble person. And if he could inspire anybody, he would just get very happy about it. So thank you for saying that. It means a lot.
No problem. And the truth has spoken.